will bring this meeting to order. Board Clerk, will you please call the roll call?
Directors Osborne, Veerkamp, Enzini, and Dwyer present. Director Day is participating via teleconference. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Clerk to the Board Sullivan present.
All right, we will rise and start the meeting off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Osborne, you want to start us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's not allowing me to promote him to the panelist, so I'm not the host.
All right, we will move forward on adopting the agenda.
Can we just hold on for 1 second?
Okay, little technical difficulty here, so be patient. Board Clerk, could you please call the roll again, so we make sure we all are here?
Okay, we'll just, we'll wait until Director Dwyer returns. But for all those that are participating, we apologize for the delay in this morning's meeting. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, and we have Director Alan Day participating remotely, as noted on today's agenda. So we opened the meeting at 9:01 this morning. We had our Pledge of Allegiance, and I called the roll. However, per the request of our board president, I will call the roll one more time since we did have technical difficulty this morning. We have Directors Osborne, Veerkamp, Enzini, and Dwyer participating here in the boardroom. We have Director Alan Day participating remotely as noted on today's agenda, General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Clerk to the Board Sullivan.
Thank you very much. So next on the list is our adopting of the agenda. Board, what is
I'll move that we adopt the agenda as presented. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. Are there any public members online who want to make, or inside this room, to make a comment?
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instruction on page 2 of today's agenda. We have one member of the public, Mr. Lovell.
Is this an appropriate time to make a comment about something that's not on the agenda today?
No, that would be during our open public comment period in just a moment. This is only on the adoption of today's agenda. So
Okay.
once we get to that comment period, I will remind you that that would be the appropriate time to speak, Mr. Lovell.
Thank you.
All right.
Hold on.
Okay. No other comments? No more hands raised virtually. All right. It's been motioned by Director Dwyer, seconded by Director Veerkamp to approve, to adopt the agenda. Board, what do you say?
How do you vote? Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. I'm sorry.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right. We're on the agenda item communications. General Manager?
Good morning. I have one recognition I'd like to point out. We received an email from Peter Rippert in appreciation of one of our employees, Kimberly Holland. She's in the audience today. Mr. Rippert said, "I rarely, if ever, write reviews. This is an exception. Kim is what an employee should be. She's polite and clear with information. She takes the time and patience to look up answers that she may not have readily at hand. She does what she says she's going to do in a timely manner. I just wanted to take a few moments of your time to express to you that as far as employees go, Kim is a gem. So Kim, thank you very much for providing excellent service to our customers.
It's always good to get comments from our public regarding our employees, and we really, really are glad that you are representing us well. Thank you so much, Kim.
You too.
Okay, anything else from the general manager?
Not today.
Okay, public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to make comments on anything that's not on the agenda. I think we have someone with a hand up in our virtual room.
Mr. Lovell?
Good morning. Good morning, board. This is Brian Lovell from El Dorado Hills. There was a good presentation at the last board meeting about the project to change the diversion point of permit 21112. It was noted that this is part of the gravity feed project and that the proposed diversion point includes the existing facility at Khyber and new facilities at White Rock or Slab Creek. The reasons for the project are that the existing diversion point at the Fulton Lake Pump Station is energy intensive and costly to operate and doesn't have sufficient operational flexibility or drought resilience. So why did this project to change the diversion point only get going recently instead of when originally planned and as recommended in the 2013 Integrated Water Resources Master Plan as adopted by the board at the March 25th, 2013 board meeting? The scope of the work, the cost, timing, and phasing was laid out in that presentation. The planning and permitting activities for the upstream diversion project that are underway now should have begun 8 years ago. Yet there are no records or documents to show that any of this work was ever started back then and why it wasn't. If the upstream diversion project had been underway 4 or 5 years before the documenting of the decrepit condition of the Fulton Lake Pump Station, a more informed and rational decision could have been made about whether the pump station could be patched up until the new upstream facility was online in 2025, instead of the ramming through of the $42 million contract as was actually done for this job. Clearly, the district finds the upstream diversion an important project. So again, I ask, why did this project not start when originally proposed? Also at the last board meeting was a presentation about the update to the 2013 Integrated Water Resources Master Plan. At the introduction to this presentation, Director Dwyer said how very important this update is to guiding the future of the district. I wonder if this update will be followed as well as the original 2013 version was. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lovell. All right, are there any other hands up on virtually to speak regarding items that are not on the agenda?
It does not appear there are any additional members of the public wishing to speak on today's open comment period.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to communications. This is for the general manager first.
I have nothing more to add this morning.
Good idea. Clerk to the board.
None today, thank you.
Okay, board of directors.
Just been working with some constituents on getting ag meters and stuff like that, but I'll be back tomorrow working with a meeting to solidify one. I'm trying to do the best I can to keep Apple Hill as rural as possible. So, yeah.
Regarding grants?
Huh?
Grants?
Grant, no,
Okay.
water meters, whether they could use small farm, farm ag, whatever. Yeah, so working with that.
Okay. Okay. Director Dwyer?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Director Day?
No, thank you. Nothing at this time.
All right. We'll just move on to the next item, which is approval of the consent calendar. Are any action items here need to be pulled?
Consent calendar items that would need to be pulled.
Yes, on the consent calendar. Nope. No items?
I'll move approval.
Okay. Second. Okay, moved and approved that the consent calendar by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Osborne.
Again, if members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This is a public comment period for any items on today's consent calendar. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's consent calendar. Would you like for me to call for the vote?
Director Dwyer has a comment.
I just have
I
a
apologize.
quick comment, and that's on the warrant register, under our wastewater treatment plant, I noticed we're going to pay for a spin doctor. And I hope that that's something to do with processing waste and not something for Jesse's organization. End of comment.
Should we address
I think Director Dwyer's comment was in relation to action item number 5, the approval of the warrant registers. So
Right.
we haven't gotten to that yet. We're still
not
on
there
the
yet.
consent
Boy,
calendar.
I was ready, spring-loaded. Pulling a beer
Thanks
can.
for catching that one. It's been a rough start, folks, so bear with all of us. All right, so there's been a motion and a second, and we have an act to approve the consent calendar.
Would you like me to call the vote?
Yes, I would.
How do you vote, Division 1? Division 2?
Aye.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously. The meeting falls apart when you're not here, Alan.
Thanks.
All right, so we will now move on to action items on the agenda. The first one is number 5, finance.
This is the warrant registers. We could have a first and a second, and then we'll take Director Dwyer's comment again.
I'll move it, but I have a comment.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, moved and seconded for item number 5.
And let the record reflect I will be recusing myself from this item.
All right,
I think it'd be appropriate for the public to understand what these fuel costs are doing to our budget. And I'd like to have a little report on the next board meeting on what, I'm sure this is having a major impact on our operations, so I'd like to have a little update on that.
okay. Director Dwyer.
Again, I noticed there's a line item under wastewater for a spin doctor, and maybe need a little bit of clarification of what that is. I noticed that, yeah.
I'm assuming that it's to dewater some of the wastewater, but that's my assumption.
Thank you, I'll accept that. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? There's a motion on the floor.
We're open for public comment for action item number 5. President Zini, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 5. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes, it would.
How do you vote, Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, finance. We have a presentation. Mr. Price.
Good morning. This is an item to consider the authorization to issue some debt to pay for the unfunded actuarial liability. In attendance from down south are our financial advisors, Laura Carpenter and Robert Poor, and Tarlin A. from the firm of Fieldman, Roloff and Associates, and also one of the bond counsel, Lawrence Chan from Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Roth. So if there's any real specific questions, they're here to answer those questions. Okay. So next slide, please. So previous board action is I updated the board last board meeting on February 28th and related to the Public Employees Retirement System unfunded pension liability. Next slide. So this debt, if and when it's issued, would make contributions to the PERS to fund the pension benefits for certain district employees. And the accrued unfunded actuarial liability is what we would be paying down. And the funds would go for those, for that reason. Next slide. So as I went over at the last board meeting, we had two runs at what the market would look like at different times. At the January 20th meeting, or January 20th assessment, the interest rate would be about 3.16 with positive annual cash flow of $500,000 to $1.7 million, depending upon year of the 22-year retirement. Total cash flow savings would have been $28 million. Just a few weeks later, the market firmed up, or not firmed up for us, but for the Treasury market, and interest rates went up to about 3.66 for similar issues like ours. The day I presented on the 28th, I think the market went down to about 3.46, so it's fluctuating. So it's at this point in time, it's hard to say what interest rates we would have at the point in time. Again, at the February 16th assessment, positive cash flow savings of about $500,000 to $1.4 million, depending upon year of retirement of the debt. Total cash flow savings of approximately $23.5 million, and net present value savings of $16.7 million. The structure of the maturities will be over the same life as CalPERS is having us retire our unfunded actuarial liability, and it's 22 years left in our schedule. We're following the 30-year schedule of retirement of the UAL. It has less annual impact
Mark?
on the district. Yes?
Yeah, this is Director Day. I think I'm on the same slide as you.
Slide 4.
Something I want to, point out is I thought it was telling that between January the 3.16 to 3.66, what I noticed in looking at the NPV, the net present value savings, is there was a 0.5% difference in the bond had a huge impact on the net present value savings. It was almost $5 million, or almost a quarter reduction in net present value savings. So I just want to point that out, and just that I have some concerns that if interest rates tick up, if they tick up over 4, just a point, and maybe you can address it, that how sensitive our savings could be to the interest rate.
You point out essentially the same thing I talked to the last board meeting. It is very sensitive, market-driven. The interest rate right now, CalPERS is charging us, or assuming in their calculation, is 7%. So even if it was 4%, there would be a 3% savings. But you do point out.
Is,
Go ahead.
yeah, to that point, and these were questions I'm sorry I wasn't able to ask at the last meeting, but isn't CalPERS lowering their estimate to 6.8%, and isn't their goal to lower it, expected returns down to 6% over the coming years?
That is correct. And then the kicker, or I guess the flip side of that is when they reduce the rate of return on the calculation to 6.85 and then lower over time, they'll lower it as interest earnings or their fund earnings are exceeding what they assume. So it's kind of inverse. However, the UAL will go up as their discount rate goes down. So this is, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. This
Right.
actually will reduce our liability over time.
Right. What,
So,
on
but
the
again, the market. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm sorry. On these proposed, the 2022 A's, if we issue them, could we pay them off early, and when could we pay them off early?
As in refinancing them, or just
Buying them back, or paying them off?
Paying them. It'd be how
Yeah.
it's structured. I'll let maybe Robert Poor or Laura Carpenter talk to that. If you're there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, members of the board. I'm Robert Poor. We would expect to have a call feature in this bond.
Robert, can you speak up?
Oh, is this better?
Yes. Robert Poor, as I mentioned at the beginning, is a financial advisor down in Irvine, Field and Roll Up. And Laura Carpenter is also with the firm. So there are financial advisors on this deal. Yes. So Robert, go ahead.
Is this better? Can you hear me, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we would expect to have a 10-year par call in the bond issue. So you'd be able to do a refunding for savings where the market, market conditions acceptable in 10 years.
Okay. So does that answer the question, Director Day?
It does, and a proposal or an idea that I'd like for us to explore is looking at, if we do this and we generate some cash flow savings, I'm a little concerned that we'll just spend that savings. And what I would like to see us look at, and maybe the staff can bring this back, it doesn't have to be part of this motion, but look at, can we estimate the net present value or the annual cash flow savings and put, say, 80% of that money aside so that in 10 years' time, we could look at buying some of these back or paying them off. And I think I would think that would generate even greater savings for us and for our ratepayers. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I think Director Dwyer actually talked to the point at last board meeting. And did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you. Yes, Director Day, I did propose a similar approach that we create some kind of a sinking fund or a separate account to deposit or record the actual savings and then use that to insulate us against future unfunded liabilities that are caused by CalPERS estimates that don't hit the mark. And also, we could use the balance to pay off these bonds early. So I think that's a very good idea. I think it's very fiscally responsible for us to do that. And I think it's important, at this point, we might as well point out to the public that this issuing of bonds is really not increasing our debt. It's changing the debt from owing CalPERS the balance to owing our bond holders the balance at a much reduced cost. So it's a good fiscal move, and I think it's appropriate to do it.
I'm glad we think alike. Let's continue to have staff pursue that and see if we can set that up. Thank you. Excellent.
Director Osborne would like to speak.
For our financial advisors and for Mark, if we were to put up a potential in there for a call in 5 years, what would that do to our interest rates? Or could, it probably maybe tick it up a little, I would think, but, with the interest rate situation going, and we could be potentially going into a recession with this cost of inflation and everything, it could drive the market one way or the other. So it's hard to tell, but I just wondered if it would be in a district's best interest to at least pursue what it would take for a 5-year call versus a 10-year call.
That is an option. You're likely correct that it would drive the interest
Could you
rate
speak up a little bit?
Mr. Poor,
Oh,
we
I
just
apologize.
need to have you, we can hear you clearly, just the volume of your voice is not quite high enough for us to hear you in the boardroom.
Okay. Is this better?
Perfect,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you,
you.
we appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for the inconvenience. Yes. We can look at embedding a 5-year call. It's likely that the interest rate will go up because it's a little bit unusual for a taxable series of municipal bonds, but we could certainly review it with the underwriter Citigroup and give an update to staff for the board's consideration at another board meeting.
That would be great, thank you.
I don't think we should kick that can, because as you said, Director Osborne, the future is uncertain, and the interest rates could plummet or go down, but they also could do the reverse. So I think time is of the essence, and to have a 5-year call is going to make these bonds less attractive. So I think we should proceed as presented, and maybe with the caveat on option 1 is to create this sinking fund to either insulate ourselves from future unfunded liabilities from CalPERS or use the sinking fund to pay off the bonds at the 10-year mark.
So just to recap, Director Day brought forward some concerns, and Director Dwyer accepts the fact that, and we all more or less agreed that if having I would call it's maybe a separate pocket of funds that would help, that we could draw from if there is a serious change in the rates. Mm-hmm. So it does insulate us. I think most of us are kind of like, understand that, but if you look at what the ratepayers are going to win on this, it is going to benefit our ratepayers also by reducing our liability. The important thing, I want to ask Mr. Poor, is it P-O-R-R? What a name for this kind of funding. Anyway, Mr. Poor, are other agencies doing this with their CalPERS, or is this the first one you've done for this type of financing?
It's fairly common for cities and counties and school districts to do this type of financing.
Right.
There are only a few utilities that I'm aware of that have either considered this or are doing this type of structure. And most of it depends on the size of the UAL. El Dorado water or irrigation districts is fairly large, and there is an opportunity to drive savings to the ratepayers by refunding what we consider the CalPERS debt, where you're paying 7% on that unfunded liability to CalPERS each year versus the current market. So, we think it's an attractive opportunity for the district to pursue.
Thank you very much. I just want to reiterate that what in the ratepayer's pocket, it's very similar to when you have two credit cards and one is at 14% and another one is at 7. You're going to want to change the balance from the 14% to the 7% and get rid of that higher interest. So in the long run, you kind of like look at it in your own personal pocket. But this is how we treat our business. And the important thing people understand, CalPERS is one of the largest pension funds in this country. And yes, there were some serious flaws in 2008. There are some of us who are benefactors of CalPERS. We paid into that CalPERS, so we're getting our CalPERS pensions. But the benefactors is the ratepayers and the agency not paying as much. If we're going to be paying more for our gasoline, we might as well reduce the amount of money that we need in the long run. And I agree with Director Day and Director Dwyer that funding that and putting it in a pocket where we can grab it and need it. Because right now our market is very, very up and down. And this is no different than it was in 2008. And by being responsible to the CalPERS participation, this kind of puts it in our lap and not in theirs, and that's a better thing. But they're still benefactors of the CalPERS system. Thank you. Any other questions? All right.
So next slide.
Anybody? Oh, okay. Keep going.
So the, excuse me, consideration is that the issue would not exceed 80 million, and it will fund the amortization costs of the pension benefits for the UAL. So the documents that are to be considered in this resolution are the indenture of trust, continuing disclosure certificate, purchase contract, and a good faith estimate. Next slide, excuse me. So the indenture of trust is the agreement between U.S. Bank Trust Company, National Association as the trustee, and El Dorado Irrigation District. Continuing disclosure certificate describes the reporting requirements for the duration of the 2022A refunding revenue bonds. And that's essentially our reporting requirements to the bond market. The purchase contract is the agreement between the district and Citigroup Global Markets, Inc. And this resolution will memorialize the principal amounts in interest rate on the 2022A bonds upon sale and prior to closing. Next slide.
We're moving to slide 8.
Sorry. And then the good faith estimate represents the estimated financial outcome of the transaction, including estimates of the true interest cost, the transaction fees paid to third parties, the net proceeds of the transaction, and the total debt payments under the contract. Slide 9. The preliminary official statement is not part of this resolution. It will be, I say here, it'll be brought March 28th. Actually, that's going to change to April 25th. We're working on getting it into a very firm form so that we can discuss that with the rating agencies. But just so you know that we'll be bringing the preliminary official statement to the board for an adoption of a resolution adopting it on April 25th. Next slide, slide 10. So the district resolution that's being considered today will approve the bond documents, appoints the U.S. Bank as the trustee, authorizes execution and delivery of all the necessary documents, and then authorizes the general manager to issue the 2022A refunding revenue bonds. Slide 12, please.
Slide 11 or slide 12?
Oh, excuse me. You clicked it already. So remaining tasks is, again, we have to approve and print the preliminary official statement. I have here meet with rating agency or plural. At this point in time, we think we'll just be meeting with Standard & Poor's. Moody's is already pretty up to date on all the information on their, they do an annual review of the district. We need to price the bonds and sign purchase contract, and then the pre-close. That'll all happen just a few days prior to the transaction. After the transaction, we'll print the official statement, close the bonds, and deliver the funds to CalPERS.
Slide 12.
Slide 12, thank you. So the option before the board is to adopt the resolution authorizing the issuance of not to exceed 80 million aggregate principal amount of refunding revenue bonds, authorizing the execution and delivery of not to exceed 80 million aggregate principal amount refunding revenue bonds, that looks duplicate, and approving the execution and delivery of certain documents in connection therewith and certain other matters. Our recommendation is option 1 at this point.
Okay, Director Osborne.
And this is probably a pie-in-the-sky question, but $80 million is not a lot in PERS's arena for unfunded liabilities. But is there any potential, and I'd like our other advisors besides Mark to read into this, is there any potential for a discount for prepayment of the incurred debt, unsecured debt? If we were to pay the bonds off, would there be any kind of potential of getting some kind of a 2 or 3% reduction in our costs?
Well, what's going to happen is once the bonds are issued, the cash will go to CalPERS. So that transaction's complete. Now, paying off the bonds early.
No, I'm talking about paying PERS off early. Is there any potential of getting a reduction, a prepayment bonus, so to speak?
No.
Probably not. I just said it was a pie-in-the-sky thing, but it would be worth it, to ask.
Yeah, no, there's not. But they'll actually work with CalPERS. It takes about 10 days to get their best estimate as to what the UAL is when we get ready to close the deal. So, but there's no discount.
Okay, I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, no, appreciate that.
Mark, this is Director Day.
Yes.
Yeah, so if we do these bonds and then we agree to a number with CalPERS and we quote unquote pay off our unfunded liabilities, are we still at risk down the road that if, say, their returns tank and are horrible, could they come back and say, okay, thanks for that 80 million, but we want 40 more from you? Could that happen?
I don't know about the 40 aspect, but yes, UAA.
Well, I know. I'm just I'm being dramatic.
The UAL could grow, yes. We're hedging, 70 or whatever this issuance would end up being. We're hedging that piece, so obviously that won't grow as much. But Director Dwyer in the last board meeting, when we talked to actually this specific point, that was what he was thinking of as far as the cash flow savings, potentially putting that aside so we could keep up with any UAL going forward with that cash flow savings of the next 22 years, if I categorize that correct, Director Dwyer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Director Day? Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay, Director Dwyer.
Yeah, one other observation. In the agreement, section 6.12, I just want to point out that it requires us, the district, to have rates sufficient to support the debt service. So it's important that when we look at our budget and our rates, that we assure the lenders that we have sufficient cash flow to meet our obligations. Just wanted to point that out. So I will move option 2, actually, which is I will call option 1 with the caveat that we take those cash flow savings and identify them somehow in a separate account, in a sinking fund, whatever we want to call it, to do two things. One is retire this debt early if we can, and two is to insulate us against future PERS unfunded liability growth or whatever. And then, this is not part of my motion, but a question. Can we put a cap on the interest rate with, do we have some kind of escape clause before we issue these bonds that say, if the rate goes to 5%, the deal's off? Can we put?
We can work with the financial advisors for sure on that. It's not going to be built into the documents, but yeah, I think that goes to Director Day's question almost. Where, what is a good amount, what is not?
And we need to push an eject button if it's not to our advantage to do this.
Yeah. So
when we get ready to
yes.
pull the trigger, so to speak.
I'll second Director Dwyer's motion.
Okay, good.
This is Director Day.
Perfect. Now we have more discussion. Okay, any members of the public who want to speak to this? This would be item number 6 on the agenda, and the motion on the floor is an option 2. Take most of the adoption resolution in option 1 and add to it a cash flow savings into sinking funds that will prepare us for protection on our funding mechanism and our budgets.
At this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 6. However, I will restate the option 2 moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Day. Adopt a resolution authorizing the issuance of a not to exceed 80 million aggregate principal amount of refunding revenue bonds in one or more series and approving the execution and delivery of certain documents in connection therewith and certain other matters, including a cash flow savings reserve fund. And the other specificity you're not including in your motion, correct, Director Day and Director Dwyer? The rest is just direction to staff, as long as we have the cash flow savings reserve fund. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct, Director Day?
Yes.
We don't have any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 6. President Anzini, would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote? Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation, and let's move on with some of our more important obligations. All right, we're moving on to number 7, engineering.
Good morning. My name is Kaylee DeLongchamp. I'm an associate engineer here at the district, and I'm here to talk about the Caltrans Camino safety project, specifically in regards to a change order for inspection services out there. All right, so a little background on this project. We previously came to the board in 2019 to approve a utility agreement between Caltrans and ourselves regarding this project for the construction. And then in 2020, we came to the board for funding regarding that once bids came in for Caltrans project. And then again in 2021, this project was included in the capital improvement plan for this year. So since it's been a little while since we came to the board about this project, sort of a little background on what the project is. The project will be installing a concrete median barrier in Camino, and so it'll inhibit left-hand turns across US Highway 50 for safety reasons. It will maintain the acceleration and deceleration lanes, and to accommodate the no more left-hand turns, they are constructing a new undercrossing. This new undercrossing affects 2 of our very important transmission lines for the district. And they also will be constructing a wildlife crossing.
We're moving to slide 5.
So this is just a little map kind of showing where things are. So the blue lines are the existing infrastructure that stays in place for EDM 1 and EDM 2, which is our 2 transmission lines. The pink lines are the new pieces of sections of pipe that'll be installed, and then the orange dotted line is the pipe that was removed for each of them to accommodate the project. Next slide. So a little background on our 2 transmission lines. Like I stated, El Dorado main number 1, or EDM 1 as we call it, and El Dorado main number 2, EDM 2. So EDM 1 is a 33-inch concrete pressure pipe that was installed in the 1960s. This project will relocate approximately 700 lineal feet of it. And then EDM 2 is also a 33-inch concrete pressure pipe in this location and was installed in the 1970s. This project is relocating approximately 600 lineal feet of it. So working together, EDM 1 and EDM 2, along with several other transmission lines in the district, feed the communities of Swansboro, Camino, Placerville, Shingle Springs, Cameron Park, El Dorado Hills. Just very important transmission lines to the district. Next slide. So there's been a couple challenges out on the project site as this project has been under construction. So with EDM 1, we had several line stop failures until we ultimately, on the 3rd try, got the line stops installed and good to go. The initial installation of EDM 1, approximately 6 of the pieces of pipe were non-compliant and therefore ended up in rejection of pipe. With EDM 2, one of the pieces of pipe was damaged by a backhoe on the site. The initial installation was not on the correct line and grade. And then, of course, also some installation issues that resulted in non-compliant work and pipe rejection. Next slide. So this is just a fun picture of the project as it was ongoing. So this is a portion of EDM 1 that was being installed. This is when they were stabbing the pipe. The way this pipe works is it has a bell and spigot, and then it's welded on the exterior before being mortared on interior and exterior. Next slide. This is 2 pictures of the same thrust block. So the one on the left is of the thrust block being poured, and the one on the right is of the thrust block being backfilled after it had cured for 24 hours. So thrust blocks are important with pipe because it keeps the pipe in place as the water with all of its force comes against those bends and wants to move the pipe. Next slide.
We're moving to slide 10.
Okay. So this is a picture of the eastern tie-in of EDM 1. The good news is that EDM 1 was tied in and is now operational again as of February of this year, which is really good news. So this was one of the tie-in pieces being lowered into the trench. Next slide. So these are a couple pictures of the western tie-in for EDM 1. So like I said, this is now tied in, which is great news. And this is just showing the welder on the right hand and getting that final piece welded in prior to it being good to go. All right, next slide. So these are just a couple of representative photos of the EDM 2 construction. Next slide. And then here on slide 13, we have just one more photo showing them backfilling the portions of EDM 2. Next slide. So, current status of the project, as I stated before, because I'm super excited about it, EDM 1 is installed, complete, and tied in. EDM 2, we have 6 pieces that were rejected. We just had the pipe arrive on site on Saturday, actually, so we're no longer awaiting delivery, but we are figuring out installation timing. So EDM 2 must be tied in before water demands increase to ensure we don't have widespread outages to our customers. So we're coordinating with Caltrans regarding this pipe rejection, the new installation, and scheduling constraints. Next slide.
We're moving to slide 15.
So The district reached out to one of its on-call consultants for construction inspection services for this project. Over the course of the time, as we've run into challenges out there, we've had to need more and more construction inspection. So we got to just under 100,000, and with this most recent change order, we are just above 100,000. So that's why I'm here today, is to get approval of that change order. So the funding requirements before you today are for the construction inspection change order, as well as additional capitalized labor. And that comes to a total of $75,000. And this project was included in the 2022-2026 CIP. Next slide, sorry. So, total project funding. In the previous board meeting in 2020, we brought to you the construction contract, capitalized labor, and a contingency. So with this new current board meeting, we're now asking for additional funding for inspection and capitalized labor, bringing it to a total funding towards this project of $1.2 million, approximately. Next slide. So the board options, option 1 is approve a contract change order to Domenichelli and Associates Incorporated in the not to exceed amount of $30,000, $240, for additional inspection services, and authorize additional funding of $44,760 for capitalized labor for a total funding request of $75,000 associated with the Camino safety project. Option 2 is take other action as directed by the board, and option 3 is take no action. We recommend option 1.
Okay. Okay, board, what is your option? Yes, Director Osborne.
Being as how the pipe was damaged by the contractor and installed incorrectly by the contractor, is there a way that we can go back and make claim against the contractor for this additional cost for our contractor to make sure it's done correctly this time?
George, Director Osborne, excuse me, thanks for that question. EID project management staff has been working very closely with my staff to coordinate on the contractor's compliance with the contract documents. And to the extent that there is non-compliance, then we have attempted and will continue to attempt to resolve that issue in a way that protects EID's customers, and that may include some sort of claim. But at this point in time, we're doing everything we can to work cooperatively and to resolve this short of any kind of adversarial process.
Okay.
So in time, we could go back and do that when the project's completed?
We are leaving all of our options open at this point in time.
That's a good answer, thank you.
Okay, Director Veerkamp.
Yeah, I think Director Osborne raises a good point, and at this point in this project, we want it to go away, obviously, and be done, but I think we keep those options open. This has been a boondoggle from almost day one, and, you know, I know we're trying to get this to the finish line, but we need to protect our ratepayers as well, and this has been one of those projects you don't want.
Director Dwyer? No? Director Day? Any comments? Okay.
No, thank you.
General Manager Abercrombie.
Oh,
I
okay.
would like to take a moment thanking Kaylee and our inspectors. Our inspectors had a very challenging job out there with the contractor. They represented EID's interest very well, even though it was somewhat confrontational, but that's their job, and they've done a great job on it. I want to thank them publicly for their diligence in making sure we get a quality project out of this. Thank you.
Great. All right.
I would echo that as well. I've been involved in the last few calls, and all of staff has worked diligently to get this project to this point, and it's not over yet. We're not holding our breath entirely, as I think Mr. Abercrombie said in the last meeting, but we need to get it there. So thank you all very much for your diligence.
So there will be a red ribbon cutting day, right?
Man.
Okay.
Before we have too much more discussion,
Right.
We need a first and a
Yes, we
second.
do.
We could continue with only questions.
I'll move it. I'll second.
Okay, it's been motioned by Director Osborne, seconded by Director Veerkamp
Option 1.
for option 1. Comments? Anybody from the public?
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Anzini, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes.
How do you vote? Division 1?
Aye.
Division 2? Division 3?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
All right. This ends our agenda items. Board members, you have reviewed the assignments that we have brought forward to staff.
There's just a couple things. We have one review of assignment from Director Osborne asking that at the next board meeting, we bring the rising fuel costs and how that's impacting the district's costs. And also, I wanted to make another note on the tentatively scheduled items. As Mark Price mentioned during his presentation under finance, it's listed the board resolution to authorize refunding revenue bonds, preliminary official statement. That will not be brought back on March 28th. That will be brought back on April 25th.
Correct. All
I
right.
believe all the other items will move forward as scheduled.
All right. We will, any motions to adjourn? Nope. We'll call this meeting closed.